should be good to go. So how and why mining is key to your future success. Now, what I wanted to do with this session this morning is, rather than going in and doing a full-blown presentation teaching you this or that, is to try and give you some context, which I hope you're going to find useful as we go into the other sessions and listen to the other speakers, but also to frame the mindset that says, the stuff that we're going to be learning this morning from all of the speakers is actually going to be critical to our future success. It may not be changing our success mode literally today, but for sure, as we go forward in life, it's actually fundamentally going to change the way that we think, the way that we work, and the results that we get. So fingers crossed. Okay, there we go. So my question to start us off with this morning is, do we know what we don't know? And I know some of you will remember the old quote that we often use, the Donald Rumsfeld quote from all those years ago, the known knowns, the unknown knowns, and the unknown unknowns. And for so much of what we're trying to do as we look to seek to improve our organizations is now really going to be about making sure that we're clear on understanding what it is that we don't know. Never mind what it is that we do know, but what is it that we don't know? And it's a really challenging question that sometimes we don't ask ourselves enough. And as we're going to go through this, what we're going to see is that mining as a technology offers us a great opportunity to spend a little more time thinking about what it is that we don't know and learning more about not just what we can discover, but just go one level deeper in understanding what it is we don't know and indeed can't know, as we'll see. So I thought that as we go through that we would use, roughly speaking, this agenda. I want to spend some time talking about the mining vocabulary, and I think that for anyone that's relatively new on that, this is going to be really, really important as we go through, whether it's today's presentations, whether it's other presentations that you receive on process mining from vendors or whatever, is to think carefully about the vocabulary and to be able to ask the key questions. And then what I want to talk about is mining and what I call the 5 key B initiatives, and we'll go into those in more detail. Why mining, and if you notice, my presentation title was about mining, not specifically process mining. And I want to talk about mining in the context of more than just process. Then look at some of the main deliverables that people talk about mining, and look at those in context. Some examples of mining use cases, mining in the context of what I call the Triple Crown. And then I have just a couple of stories to share with everyone, just to get you thinking about why it is that I see it as being so important and why I think it's going to make a big difference to your abilities to be competitive in the world ahead. So process mining may not be what you think. And the reason I say this is that depending on what you read and the research that you do, you're going to be hearing about process mining, obviously. You're going to have other people talking about process discovery. Some will talk about automated process discovery, as we'll hear more. Some will talk about task mining and journey mining. And then people will talk about it in the context of, hey, well, you can use mining and create your process models, and this is going to be great because you can ensure conformance and check for variance, etc. And then you've got a slew of newer vendors now also using the phrase process intelligence. And I can't speak for you, but I find it challenging when I'm looking at various vendors. So for example, keeping it really simple, I see task mining vendors talking about discovering process, and I see process mining vendors saying that they're discovering and doing tasks. When in actual fact, process mining and task mining are two completely different disciplines, capturing two completely different types of information for different purposes. But it's one of those things that says, well, okay, if you're a process mining vendor without task mining, and you see all the interest that everyone gets in task mining, it becomes very tempting to say, oh, yeah, well, it's really just the same thing. Or for the task mining vendors, well, let's just tell everyone that we're capturing processes. Let's not tell them that what we're doing. And it all gets very messy. You've got some process mining vendors who now tell you no longer need to do any manual process discovery. You don't need any of the workshop type stuff that we've all been brought up on. We can just use automated process discovery and use mining to do all of the process discovery for us and make all of the modeling tools redundant. Well, it doesn't actually do that. It solves a different problem, because remember, we can only run process mining on systems that we've already built. So when we're looking at manual processes, either totally or highly manual processes, process mining can't replace business analysis and process discovery workshops. It can supplement and it can complement, but it can't replace them. If we're looking to capture manual activity with a view to potentially automating, then actually that's really the domain of task mining. And task mining isn't really capturing, excuse me, full end-to-end processes. It is really capturing how people interact with systems. It's not capturing how people interact with people, for example. And I would say that it's not necessarily capturing a process. It's more likely capturing a procedure. How somebody fills in a form isn't really a process. Yes, we use the terms interchangeably. And when we're looking at conformance, great, we can run process mining and we check on conformance, but conformance to what? If we don't start with a model that we may have created in a modeling tool or having a process, then we don't know whether it's conforming to that. So we've got to be careful how we use the terms and terminology. So as I say, the language of the mining vendors can be varied and pretty confusing. So I would argue that business problems, or the main problems that we're all trying to address through process improvement, process management, process automation, et cetera, are pretty common to most industries and sizes of organization. And I've oversimplified them, of course, but we all want to improve customer experience. We all want to improve customer satisfaction. We all know that we need to find ways of improving and optimizing those customer-facing processes, as well as all the back-end stuff that we've historically done. We know that there's a pressure on all of us to be continually increasing our revenues and ideally our revenue per customer. We know that on the right-hand side here that we need to constantly be looking to remove waste. Some cases that people think about that as removing cost. I always prefer to think about it as removing waste, and with removing purely from a cost perspective, we can actually kill an organization. I don't think there's many of us on the session here today that wouldn't argue that actually whatever business that we're in, we're looking to increase efficiency. Looking back to the left again, we know that we need to be reinventing many of our products and services so that they're suitable and capable for the digital age. Digitizing and digitalization of business, and of course they are not the same thing, and too often they get confused. We've got all of these things going on, whether it's on the bottom of the right, applying and scaling RPA, ERP, migrations, managing risk, all of those things. And I tend to put those in what I see as 5 buckets as the 5 key business initiatives. We're either focused around customer excellence, business transformation, operational excellence, risk and compliance, or technology transformation. And of course, in most of our organizations, we've got projects or programs going in all of these areas at the same time. And the thing that underpins all of those, of course, is process, because it's our processes that enable, constrain, and connect everything our organizations do, either within ourselves, internally, or indeed with the outside world. And so naturally, of course, we need to be very, very focused on process, because it isn't what we do, but how we do it that makes the difference. You know, I've used in other sessions, some of you will have heard me using the examples of smartphones as one example of saying, you know, all the same parts are available to everyone. Everyone connects them up and we can make phone calls and use apps on any device. But there are a couple of organizations that have excelled at what they do and the processes that they use to create, market, sell, and monetize those devices. And that is all about their process. I mean, largely about supply chain, but principally it's all about that laser focus on process. So whatever it is that we're doing, whatever projects that we're looking at, the fundamental differentiator into how good or bad we're going to be is process. So naturally, we need to have the maximum amount of information that we can in order to deal with that. So when we look at it through that lens of process mining, then really we're looking at what I think of as 3 prime deliverables. So we're going to undertake a mining project. We're going to see some illumination. Okay, and so, you know, going back to the we don't know what we don't know, we're going to shine a light into those dark rooms and into those dusty corners, and we're going to see things that we hadn't even seen before. And I'll come back to that as to why that's going to be critically important for your future success, especially in the regulated industries. As a result of shining that light, then hopefully the process mining technologies that we use are going to deliver insights, because, you know, just being able to see everything is great, but actually what we really want to see is how things are connected. What does it mean if we move that? What else is going on? And then fundamentally, from those insights, we want to be looking at making improvements. So on the illumination, I just want to give you an example here. So often when you're looking at process mining technology or task mining technology, you have in mind a project or improving a process, whether it's hire to retire, order to cash, procure to pay, etc. We see that bandied about all of the time, and there's some great things to get from that. But I would argue that you need to be thinking harder, particularly in the regulated industries. So I've just been working on a paper with a great friend of mine, Andrew Perry, where we've been looking at some of the issues around trust and compliance regarding AI and the regulations around AI. And one of the things that's interesting is that when we look at highly regulated industries, in particular financial, what we see is that people are putting in place programs to not just use the AI, but being very cognizant of the trust and regulatory issues around AI and these sorts of decisions, from the point of view that, you know, we've got to make sure we're not discriminating. Let's keep it really simple in discrimination. But the regulations don't just suggest that you've got to be careful that the rules and the algorithms that you're using in your new AI system aren't discriminatory. The regulation just says your systems. So you've been building, many of you, systems for 30, 40 years. The regulator doesn't actually distinguish between whether you're using a 30-year-old system or a brand new system. And I think what many of us are going to find is that actually without using mining technology, we're not going to know what we don't know, because we didn't realize that we'd already embedded, whether it's in a rules engine or just simply the embedded program logic in old systems, that actually may cause us to be outside of compliance for some of these new regulatory changes that are coming down the line, and that actually some of the biases and discriminations that people are accusing organizations of making are actually deeply embedded in systems and nobody knows anymore. So please don't think that process mining is only for your ERP system or your BPMS system. Process mining in a highly regulated industry, particularly in the area of trust is going to be important for you to actually go back into really old systems where you really don't know how they are. You don't know where the decision is or how the decision's making, to uncover and illuminate some of those hitherto unknown decisions. And so it offers some amazing uses in that. And that's some of the areas. Now, in terms of the insights, then this is where we get into the areas of predictability, right? Because it's one thing to be running our mining and seeing in the rear view mirror what's gone on, but actually we want to spend our time looking at the future and seeing, well, how does the future look like? And there's some really great stuff being done now in using mining technology to predict what's likely to happen. Now, the interesting thing there is what's likely to happen based on the past, but also what's likely to happen based on an increase in volume, or you're going to be starting to put more cases through this scenario, or you're going to do less. And what impact is that going to have? And then fundamentally, of course, it's offering us that ability for improvement. And, you know, I would argue and have in other places that I think that the process mining technology, not process mining per se, but process mining technology will become the continuous process improvement system for the 21st century. And hopefully that will become a little more obvious as we go through the next few slides. So as I say, mining means more than just process. And, you know, we've seen process mining, the mining is an underlying technology. Now we know about process, we're hearing a lot about task. Anyone that's been involved in any RPA projects for sure will know and have heard constantly about task mining, because obviously the task recording, task mining piece became more known and more important with the advent of RPA, but it's got far greater uses than that. And, you know, I'll come into some of those in a minute, but we need to mine processes, we need to mine tasks, and we need to be connecting process and tasks if we want to see a full picture of how processes are occurring and what's happening. The other one that I think that there's not yet been enough attention on is the area of journey mining. And I think this will potentially be an amazing area for changing the results, particularly those people looking at revenues, where we can really see what journeys people are going on. Now, again, just like I separate the process and task, I want to be careful with journey that we don't just say customer journey, because there are numbers of different journeys that we can look at. I don't know what in our next presentation my old friend Richard's going to talk about, but I know that, for example, if we take Abby, then they would say that actually you can look at a mortgage application journey or an insurance claim journey. So actually we can look at the way that the file, the folder, or the entity flows through systems, flows through the organization. So we can look at journeys from that perspective. Some of the earliest and most pervasive work around journeys is actually in healthcare, where we look at patient pathways and patient journeys in moving through hospitals, getting different treatments and predicting what are the better ways to treat people and what patient outcomes are going to be. So some really great work around that. We've got employee journeys. How does the employee navigate through our organization? We can look at user journeys. So how does a user navigate through a system? So there are lots of different uses of journey, many of which fundamentally change the way that we think about productivity. And then I've hinted at it from the regulatory and compliance perspective, but let's think about the decision mining, because a lot of the variance that we see when we look at the spaghetti diagrams of a process mining output are actually really questioning the decisions, because it isn't necessarily that X number of cases went this way and Y number of cases went that way. What we actually want to uncover is, well, what was the decision? Because it could well be that we put in, for example, in an insurance claims process, that claims under 100 euros go a certain way, under 1,000 go a third way, and under 10,000 go, and over 1,000 go a third way. Now, it could well be that when we look at the volumes going through those, that actually the thing that we need to question isn't the pathways or the alternative paths, but simply questioning that said, well, actually, when we put in the €100 limit, how much was a euro worth? Oh, actually, maybe we need to change that now to 250 or move the 1,000 up to 2,000. And suddenly, just by changing the decision or the rule, we can significantly change it. And we saw a lot of this years ago in developing process workshops, where we realized that some of the biggest cost savings were being made by simply eliminating redundant rules and decisions and amending other rules and decisions to bring them up to date and make them fit with the modern workforce. So often we can make tremendous process improvements by looking at decisions. So when you're taking on mining, think about your solutions and their ability to capture, support, and provide insight for all of those different areas. Now, when we're looking at use cases, there's a little bit of a fixation at the moment around process mining to do with robotic process automation or other types of process automation. But I've something to share with all of you. If you're looking at taking on board process mining, that you may find it difficult to justify the continued use of process mining if you're only thinking in terms of those two use cases. You know, it's a bit like saying, you know, great, you know, people talk about it as an MRI scanner, as an X-ray, etc. Well, you don't have an X-ray or an MRI in every local doctor's surgery, right? It's a specialist piece of equipment that gets brought out on appropriate occasions. So one thing that I think for the vendors is that we need to make it more like an ultrasound scanner, which is easy to use, far cheaper, used by different levels of people and on many, many more problems. But the real key in making sure that mining is constantly delivering its value to you is to apply it as a monitoring mechanism for the ongoing mechanism of what's going on. So not just mining what is, but constantly populating with real-time information, giving you those real-time dashboards and those real-time insights that can enable you to constantly act and react. And of course, that's the foundation of that continuous process improvement for the 21st century. So you will forever be optimizing and tweaking from an efficiency point of view. Doesn't replace the need to step back and question whether you're doing the right things, but assuming that you are happy with what you're doing and you are doing okay, then it will help you make sure that they work there. But the other thing that should significantly help and seems to be a massive economic puzzle worldwide is the area of productivity. And this is especially so in the case of task mining. So we think of task mining for RPA, but I wonder how many of you think about the fact that for anyone in the products business, that actually we could use task mining and desktop recording as a way of identifying how users might interact with new functionality in our product. So from a product management point of view, we can now capture real insight into how people actually use our products, the paths that people actually go down, the way that they actually deliver, thereby increasing the productivity of product management. As a tool to bring in the facts and the feelings for business analysts, we can massively increase the productivity of a business analyst. From a systems analyst point of view, we can use the combination of process and task mining to actually create system requirements. We can use it for system migrations if we want to move from an old, shall we say, legacy on-premise solution to a new cloud solution. We can capture those kinds of requirements. We can use them for workforce optimization. We can use it for training. And there is a whole list of things there that can significantly improve our productivity, not just on a one-shot, but on an ongoing basis. Which brings us to the fact that in all of our projects, I argue that whatever projects or programs that we're working on, our goal should always be to deliver on the Triple Crown. That is, in a single project, rather than just saying this project's all about lowering costs or this project's all about increasing revenues, actually, if we look at it through the lens of saying Let's focus on how this can increase customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, patient satisfaction, substitute what you want in there. Then actually by doing that and just going after that one focus, then you will almost inevitably find that you lower costs and increase revenues. Now, you might say in healthcare, we don't look at increasing revenues, but of course that depends on which aspects of healthcare you're in. Some do, some don't. So, obviously not everything there. But mining has a massive impact on your ability, particularly when you're looking through the lenses of journeys and tasks, journeys and decisions, beg your pardon. Then you can massively focus around that customer, patient, citizen type approach and deliver those things in spades. And it makes such a difference to the ongoing part of an organization. So if you're not sure how important or whether mining is for you, then just a couple of stories to finish off with today. So in the top picture, this is an old process workshop that I ran some years ago in South Africa, and we can see people using the classic post-it note approaches, which I'm still a massive fan of, so I hope they never go away. But I have to agree that in our ever robotic, ever systemized world, that putting R2D2 C3PO in the room doesn't quite have the same effect. They don't seem to be overly keen to share with me what it is they do. It's a bit like, well, who's this schmuck bringing us here? We're not going to tell him what we do. So I can't use the workshopping technique. It doesn't matter whether I want to, whether I like it. The fact is that in an ever increasing digitized world, I can't do it. I need a different way. So unfortunately, whether we like it or not, mining is that different way to run those discovery workshops, assuming that the processes, procedures, decisions, journeys, etc., are now locked in a system of some kind. And then as we're rushing to our digitized world and we're looking at these things, I'm not sure how many of you will remember, but some years ago now, probably about 3-4 years ago, then Ocado, who were perceived as an online grocery store, but now is almost, although they're still doing that, is almost seen as a tech company in providing fully automated picking and packing for groceries in the warehousing, themselves the technology all over the place, had a massive fire. And this fire wiped millions and millions of pounds overnight off of their stock price as this totally automated factory goes up. And the factory was, the warehouse was a pride because of the levels of automation, and they put in all the automation. But, going back to our beginning, was they didn't know what they didn't know. And what they didn't know was that if you build a totally automated warehouse stroke system, and you put in all of the robots and all the systems all picking and packing and great, and you have a failure, fire suppression system, fire alarm system, if there are no humans left in the building, there's nobody left to smell the smoke. So when we're looking at putting in all the technologies that we look to put in, and certainly even in those AI scenarios, and you're going to see a lot of this coming out with the regulators, they still talk about human in the loop. So although we're doing all of our mining and we're doing all of the analysis and using our task mining to put in systems, we still need to remember in our organizations, who is there to smell the smoke? When something's not going as it should be, how and who's going to do it? Have we put in that process monitoring? Have we put in monitoring systems for those tasks? Because the robot's just going to repeatedly do what it does. What happens if it gets bad information? Where are we doing that monitoring? And what kind of process intelligence and predictability are we applying? So hopefully that's given you a few things to think about and shape some of your thoughts and ideas as we go into the later sessions. Please, really happy for you to reach out to me with those questions. I can see that we've got a couple in the chat, and I'm just going to turn the sharing of the presentation off here and let you go back to, there we go, we're back to me. So, okay, so just a couple of questions then that we'll try and deal with. So the first question, the one that I get frequently is, Mark, you're talking about the importance of process and task mining, but we know from other presentations that you've done and from articles you've written that you say that process mining won't exist as a market within a couple of years. So yes, I stand by what I suggest. Great question. I stand by what I suggest, and it's because I separate the mining market from the mining capability. We've already seen lots of mergers and acquisitions, and even since I was last sharing on the US version of this, then we've had iGraphics acquiring Logpicker and other acquisitions as well. So there's going to continue to be mergers and acquisitions, but the one thing that I can be sure of is that, or I am sure of, is that the technology, the mining technology, is not going to go away. It's going to become ever more important, and I think there'll be good homes for all of those vendors that seek homes, and some incredible solutions that broaden it. And by the way, no surprises with my background, that I'm a real fan of the combination of the modeling with the mining, and I think it gives us a really great 360-degree view of how to think about, plan, and make improvements going forward. And the last question I'm going to answer and duck at the same time, which is, are there any vendors that I would particularly recommend? I'm not going to answer that because A, we've got some great solutions and great vendors being represented here today. I've worked with a number of different vendors, and I think everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. The main advice that I would have for you is look carefully through that language. Make sure that you're not buying something that just addresses a singular problem. In other presentations, I talk about the fact that few businesses have that singular 10 or $100 million problem. Many of us have lots of $1 million problems. So let's make sure that when you're looking at a technology and you're looking at a vendor, I recommend you look at someone that's going to be able to solve lots of different problems rather than just one singular one. And I guess the other piece that I would say is, when you're talking to vendors around the proof of concept thing, then less look at a proof of concept and more have them look at a proof of value. The difference being that a proof of concept, they might come in and look at a little bit of piece of the process for you for relatively low cost. In a proof of value, you've probably got to make a commitment, but what the vendor is really saying is, if you make that commitment to spend this with me, then I will make commitments on delivery and what the outcomes can be. So I hope that's helped you in terms of where we're going. I'm just going to flip back into, there we go, flip back to my other background, and we're going to sign off in just a moment, but we'll be back on the hour with Richard Rabin from Abbey, and I look forward to seeing you all again very shortly and having a great morning. So go grab that coffee. I'm certainly going to, and we'll catch you all in just a few minutes time.